Hello, Nigeria, hello, Africa. Welcome to Iron Issues, coming to you live on Spectrum Television. My name is Frank Cesadet, and I'm delighted to welcome you on board to this discuss as we'll take you through the political terrain. Of course, you know, on February 25, 2023, we had, as a country, Nigeria conducted the presidential and National Assembly elections, and shortly after that, we had to postpone that of the state's election, and it was moved forward to March 18, which took place, of course, over the weekend. And it followed with the collation of results across the respective state, 28 in total out of the respective states of the Federation. And out of that, we had over 17 incumbent governors vying for the respective return tickets and lost so much. And then we also had fresh candidates seeking the mandate of the people to represent their people as the governor of the #1 citizen. It was a very challenging moment. Of course, we had the different candidates vying for this position, campaigning. And as part of today's Iron Issues, we will be looking at different scenarios that played out during the presidential elections and the National Assembly elections. So we'll put that side by side with the state's election. We'll look at the electoral umpire, how they fared during the presidential and National Assembly elections and how they fared last weekend outing. Well, looking at the observers from the EU point of view, we will be looking at how far the elections has been compared to previous year's elections that has been conducted in Nigeria. I recall that during the national elections, we had different issues bordering on the e-transfer of results from the respective polling units. And of course, after that example, or after that experience rather, INEC took a step further to try to redeem their image, and that led to what we saw in some quarters of Nigeria, the electronic transmission of results for the state's election. But there has been a lot of questions in the streets of Nigeria bordering on the reason why INEC could not, despite the years it had to prepare for the national elections, ensure strict compliance and implementation of the basic provisions of the Electoral Act 2022. Joining me on set today to do justice to this all-important issue is an erudite scholar and a seasoned politician, political affairs analyst, is none other than Mr. Joseph. I hope I got that correct.
Yeah, you're right.
Welcome to Iron Issue. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you.
All right. I know you're a politician, and this season has been a very serious one for you. So let's start from home. How has the political period been?
Well, I'm not a politician. I'm a journalist by training. By the virtue of my appointment, I came into politics, so I'm not really a career politician.
Well, you still can be classified as a politician, regardless, because right now you are in the corridors of power. Okay,
thank you.
Let's quickly take a look at the preliminary statement, talking about the EU preliminary statement. I had a conversation with the EU media publicist just this afternoon, Ms. Agnes Doka, and part of the findings of the EU through their preliminary investigation and observation of the state election, it seems to have been a significant change as to what happened during the presidential elections. We'll just give voice to the press briefing by the EU that happened yesterday in Abuja. And when we come back, we will be dwelling on the basic issues that has been raised by the EU Commission. Stay with us.
Also directly observed by EU EOM observers, further detracted from an appropriate conduct of the election in many places. The use of election technology was more efficient this time around. By midday yesterday, gubernatorial race results forms available online range from 62 to 97%, depending on the state. A notable change if compared to the 25th of February election, when more than a quarter of presidential result forms were still missing at the declaration of the results on the 1st of March. Some 11,000 candidates competed in the state elections, among whom only a bare 10% were women. Notably, lead political parties fielded only 2 female candidates for highly prized governor seats. It demonstrates a clear underrepresentation of women in political life. Most importantly, it also shows the lack of internal party policies to support and promote inclusion of women. And let me also remind you that it is almost 40 years since Nigeria signed up to the United Nations Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and in so doing committed to eradicate discrimination against women in political life. Before I share our assessment of the campaign environment, let me stress that intra-party conflicts compounded by protracted deadlines for candidacy disputes created wholesale uncertainty for voters and electoral contestants alike. We observed that some court decisions about the electoral contestants were taken only a few days before the poll. Such timelines effectively reduce candidates' prospects to meaningfully campaign. Overall, campaigns in the state elections were highly competitive. Fundamental freedoms of assembly and movement were largely respected. However, the latter was impeded in some states by insecurity and executive actions. Further, organized violent attacks shortly before the polls led to a fearful atmosphere in some parts of the country. The campaign also saw many defections and individuals switching supports from one party to another. Our observers noted that in several states, the abuse of incumbency gave an undue advantage to the party in power and limited the free expression of the will of the voter. Positively, voters in 15 out of 28 states benefited from professionally organized media debates, during which journalists questioned lead gubernatorial candidates on issues of local concern, while fact-checkers probed their responses for accuracy. It helped voters to make a better informed choice on election day, even if most incumbents rebuffed media offers. Unfortunately, attacks and harassment of journalists that occurred on the 25th of February went unprosecuted. I would hope that those who assault journalists, as well as those who perpetrated such attacks during this Saturday's polls, will be brought to justice. Our social media monitoring showed that gubernatorial candidates' online communication was focused on issues, a positive change from the presidential contest. However, disinformation contaminated online information space and aimed to confuse voters. We also recorded some dangerous rhetoric seeking to sow ethnic division. Positively, fact-checking initiatives continue to debunk such content and strive to preserve the integrity of the online space. Last but not least, I would like to commend the efforts of civil society organizations. Between the elections, national observer groups raised awareness and provided important electoral information to voters. Their leadership actively participated in online and offline discussions, calling for greater transparency and accountability of INEC ahead of the state elections. As I mentioned earlier, the collation process is still ongoing, and the EU Election Observation Mission is continuing its observation of this crucial phase of the election. Therefore, I encourage stakeholders to keep committed to a peaceful process and address any grievances through the courts. In this regard, I am mindful of the fact that various aspects of the presidential election have already been brought before the courts. I understand that petitions may also be submitted regarding several Senate and House of Representatives elections. That being said, it is important that this mission maintains its strict line of impartiality and non-interference in accordance with our observation methodology. Accordingly, I do not propose to discuss matters related to those elections, as they are now likely to be sub judice.
That was the EU Chief Observer, Barry Andrews. The findings of state elections. While they said the presidential election was more or less people abusing people or candidates abusing each other, that of the state election was a lot more issue-based. How would you assess these two scenarios?
Well, they are not far from the truth from their findings. We saw a sad trend in our country for the first time that Nigerian people do not have opportunity to interrogate what the candidates was bringing on board, but instead what dominates the space was name calling, other form of abuses, people claiming rights that have helped you in time past. It's now my time to help me and stuff like that. But coming down to the states, you know, because you know the people at the grassroots do not really pay attention to all those jamborees. What the people at the grassroots mostly pay attention to what will benefit their lives, what they stand to gain in any administration. And so any candidate that is not able to communicate properly his programs, ideals, and the things that will benefit the people, you see that shift, because people want to hear what is at stake, their interests, what the new government or the continuing government, for those that are running for a second term, will bring to the table, how they'll be able to serve their interests better. So that is why you see the trend. And again, if you watch the election, in the presidential election, you could see some states go differently than the way it was projected. And in the governorship, you also experience that most of the state has gone differently, meaning that the parties that did so well in some states during the presidential election could not perform so well during the governorship election. So it therefore means that people were more focused on the individual rather than the party.
Okay, it's clearly stated within the just concluded elections, we saw a complete shift. And just before the elections came into the picture, we began to see hashtag trending vote party, or vote people and not party, or Nigerians are voting people not party trending. And that has played out across from the presidential elections to the National Assembly and now the state's election. Now, for the first time in the history of Nigeria, we're going to have a more multifaceted or multi-party system at the National Assembly and probably the state assemblies as well. But let's move away from that. Do you think the gubernatorial candidates being able to focus on issues had given the impact, or has led to the impacts that we have? Because we saw massive turnout across boards, and for the first time the election was very keenly contested.
Yes, for instance, in Akwa Ibom State, where I also observe the election, I think there's a lot of improvement, improvement in terms of voters turnout compared to the presidential election. And in the result, you see that there's increase in the number of votes compared to the last election.
Okay, let's look at women in participation in politics now. One of the key indices that the EU has raised has been the fact that due to the lack of or the absence of internal democracy, women within the Nigerian political structure were not really given the percentage they deserve. What's your standpoint on this?
Well, it's a very sad thing in our country. When I listen to the statistics and the number of women in the House of Representatives and the number of women in the Senate, it's very sad. It's very, very sad. And you see, this country cannot go forward with this kind of arrangement. The women ratio to men must increase for the country to move forward. So we cannot continue to play the way we are going.
Well, if the women themselves are not ready to take up, as men have oftentimes adjudged that women are probably not ready, is there a way that you think we can further nudge, or what do you think should be done by the political party to further give women the opportunity to participate?
Well, to conclude that women do not really support the agenda, is that you must also get to know the number of women who contested for the positions. the number of women that each political party gave opportunity to fly the flag of their parties. So if they don't give women the ticket, in Nigeria there's no provision for independent candidates. So if the political party don't give women ticket, there is no way they are going to stand election. And most importantly, I think we need to look at the laws, because the way it's going, we have to use the laws to compel the political party by way of reserving a certain number of seats for women in every contest, in every election year. Meaning that if you have 100, you can say women will take 40, and the remaining 40 will be filled by men. So I think we need to go constitutionally.
Okay, now looking at, let's go back to the recently held constitutional amendment. We all saw what happened at the National Assembly and the Senate, where bills relating to women were thrown out, and it took the women protesting before some of those bills could be brought back. You're looking at the National Assembly and the Senate that is comprises of mostly the male folks who are responsible for these laws made to guard the people of Nigeria. Do you see a possibility of this group of men making a law that will be in favor of the women, unless extra pressures are put on them?
Well, when they were men and women issues are on this cause, I am very careful in the way I talk about it, because if you in reality is that sometimes I see that disparity, I see that sort of discrimination against women when it comes to political power. But in reality is that men find it very difficult to exist without women. So how would you then not able to share political power with women? So it's a very sad narrative that when it comes to political power, men seem to push women aside, and when it comes to, you know, being comfortable, because man cannot do without a woman. That's a fact of it.
So would you say this is also an issue of the women not doing enough to, you know, make their presence felt where it matters most?
Well, I would not say that women are not doing enough to make their presence felt. Women are really doing great. Like you rightly mentioned, they had to protest. They had to show their annoyance. They had to tell the world that they have been sidelined. You get it? But do they really need to protest for them to get their rights? Do they really need to protest for them to be carried along in governance? Do they really need to protest for them to have a fair share of positions in government? That is not correct. They don't need to protest. If the men will deliberately and consciously do what is right, they will not need to protest for them to be carried along. So I believe that women are doing great. They are doing everything possible to make their voices heard. But it's just that sometimes men seem to suppress them.
Sometimes men seems to suppress them. Now let's look at the ways and the angles how men get to suppress women. Part of the reasons why women are not given the responsibilities in the position of power, in the corridors of power, has been traced down to religious and traditional injunctions or prejudices or stereotypes. Do you agree with this standpoint?
No, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it, because you see, women are just like every other person. When you say that, when people say that women are weak, it's just that women are not they are not weak. It's just that they are tender. It's just that they are kind. It's just that they have compassion. It's just that there are certain level of morality they cannot just condone, and that's why sometimes people say that women are weak. Women are very strong people. They are very strong. They are not weak.
Now let me ask you this question: is there a possibility, given the opportunity, do you think women can do better?
Well, given the opportunity, I think women can do better. Well, I would not want to say that women would do better than men, but all I'm advocating is that women should coexist, should serve alongside with men, because there are some strong decisions that needs to be taken by men that sometimes women may shy away from it. Do you understand? So you need a man, you also need a woman to move the country forward.
Well, definitely it's understandable that men and women need to coexist mutually for the country to move forward, just like we have in the home front. If you just join us, this is Iron Issue coming to you live on Spectrum Television. We're beaming live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. Join us on social, spectrumtv.ng. And of course, the phone lines will be let open, so you can feel free to join the conversations on the issues. We're talking about women participation in politics. We're also reviewing the preliminary statement made by the EU in terms of their observances as far as the presidential and national assembly elections is concerned. Of course, the state elections which took place over the weekend, with collation of results still ongoing in some states, while in some other states we've had the announcement of the governor-elect. While some states have taken to celebration, others seems to have been very quiet, as it seems the will of the people was not what was reflected by INEC. I'll look at the issues of thuggery and political violence that spread out across the nooks and the crannies of the respective state. With particularly, we'll be looking at Lagos State, where we had serious issues of violations of electoral rights of the Nigerian people. But before we go on a short break, let me come back to you, Joseph. Now, part of our jobs as journalists is to ensure that we cover the elections and we report same to the people. But in the course of our duty, particularly during this period, we oftentimes would find the regulatory agencies breathing down the media houses' neck. We've often found some situations where media operators or journalists are attacked. Thankfully for us in Akwa Ibom State, I'm yet to hear any report of such, that a journalist or a media personnel was attacked. But on the overall, in Nigeria, during the just concluded state election, we've had reports of journalists being attacked. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I think as we continue to go, we continue to experience a democracy being more evolved, being deepening enough for people to understand the role of media in an election. That they are not enemies, but they're supposed to be partners. And so in Akwa Ibom State, we are enjoying relative peace here in Akwa Ibom, but the incident that happened some days ago in Lagos State relating to media professionals being attacked in the line of their duties, very unfortunate. It shows when you see where you see that happen, it shows some level of desperation. It shows that there are certain forces that are afraid that if media houses or if journalists are allowed to operate freely and do what they're supposed to do, maybe it will be against them. And that is why you see some of those things happening in some places.
Well, what would be your advice, just before we go, what would be your advice to media operators, journalists, broadcasters while on the field of duty, particularly at periods like this, just to make sure they stay on the line of safety?
Well, we just don't have, journalists don't just have any choice than to be objective, be accurate, and be alive to their responsibility. You know, when some of those things happen, you also have to stay on the side of caution to and be safety conscious and ensure that not even your job, what's your own life. So, but very importantly, our politicians should be able to understand the important role that journalists and media practitioners play in an election in any society. And so when that happens, the attacks on journalists will reduce.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Okon. We've been having a serious conversation about the EU, reviewing the preliminary statement made by the EU as far as the presidential elections and the State House of Assembly election, and of course, the governorship elections is concerned. And we'll be going on a short break now. When we come back, we'll be dwelling more on the very key issues raised by the EU as far as the presidential and national assembly elections and the state elections are concerned. We'll look particularly on the issue of third-degree voter intimidation, disenfranchisement of Nigerians, and of course, complete violence which has skyrocketed in different parts of Nigeria, and the way out. We'll also look at the possibility of the electoral umpire prosecuting the different electoral offenders and what that would mean on the democracy in Nigeria. Stay with us. We'll be right back on Eye on Issues.
Every day, we bring you up-to-date information on topical issues affecting the common Nigerian.
Some issues on politics,
Hello, Nigeria. I remain committed.
security,
Education, health,
lifestyle, and so much more. Join Janice Kobum and Uyai Anyeken
every weekday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Rise and Shine Daily, exclusive on Spectrum Television.
Welcome back. It's Eye on Issues coming to you live on Spectrum TV. And of course, we're beaming live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. Feel free to join the conversations on our socials at spectrumtv.ng. And of course, we'll be delighted to also have you join the conversations via the phone lines right on your screen to tell us what you feel about the preliminary report of the EU as far as the state elections and the national elections are concerned. We'll be looking at another aspect of key issues that has been raised by the EU, and of course, we as Nigerians have also witnessed now. Violence has been one of the things that have been very predominantly visible during the just concluded elections, and Lagos particularly came under hit because of the different social media footages coming out from the state. And Sanwo-Olu had been re-elected as far as INEC is concerned, but there has been a big question as to whether or not politicians like him actually got back into power by gaining the vote, the mandate of the people, or by their own mechanization of the mandate of the people. We'll be looking at that and, of course, placing that side by side with the issue of third-degree voter intimidation, vote buying and selling, and how that has impacted the outcome of the general elections that has just been completed. And, of course, we'll also look at the way solutions that can possibly be given in the future movement of the political system so that we can address these issues. Before we continue, and I let my guest in and we continue this conversation, I just give audio to Barry Andrews again to one of the things the EU highlighted about voter intimidation, thuggery, and the rest of the issues. Stay with us.
around the secrecy of the casting of ballots, noted by many of our observers in polling units across the states. And this is an area obviously for improvement, but the most notable improvement was in the operation of the results viewing platform, where the promise of real-time opportunity to see the uploading of results was fulfilled in most cases. So there certainly was an improvement, but I would also add that there was a much lower turnout, which put less pressure on the electoral infrastructure that was operated on Saturday compared to the presidential.
Thank you so much. Now we take a question from the back of the room.
Good afternoon. My name is Sadia Tosun from African Independent Television. Okay, now the election so far, for the governorship election, you saw that there was issues of thuggery and violence in some parts of the state. The EU has been observing elections for quite some time now. Does it mean that your recommendations were not adopted after the past elections? My second question is, those that are disrupting the democratic processes in Nigeria, what will be the punishment after this election? Thank you.
What will be the punishment first?
Thank you very much. As I mentioned before, our election observation mission follows a very specific methodology, and this is the 7th election since the restoration of democracy in 1999 that the European Union has covered. And you're right to say that there has been widespread evidence of thuggery and of intimidation and political violence during the course of the elections that took place on Saturday. This doesn't in any way undermine our commitment as a mission to deepening the roots of democracy in Africa. We'll never turn our back on that mission. And we are honoured to be here at the invitation of INEC, and with the cooperation of all of the authorities, and with the enthusiasm, by the way, of to the danger of democratic backsliding. And I think that is something that all of us want to avoid seeing happening. But if we were to simply pull up our tent and walk away, I think that's not something anybody would like to see us do. So we are committed for this, not only for this mission, but for the future, and we will continue to work towards those ends. Thank you.
Barry Andrews there, reiterating the standpoint of the EU's commitment to ensuring Nigeria and other countries could have a better democratic process. But let's come back to you, Joseph Akon. From what the EU have stated, a lot of things played out in terms of criminal activities. We saw spate of violence, pro-attack before the election proper. We saw MC Olomo, for instance, in Lagos State, coming out to issue a public threat to the Igbo communities in Lagos. And shortly after that, we even saw the Lagos State people focusing on bringing a cultural celebration that used to be done at night to broad daylight. The Raw Festival, just so that people will not be able to go out to vote. And of course, we also saw video footages coming out from Lagos of thugs attacking polling units. How would you react to this?
Well, you see, politicians, when it comes to election time like this, they devise all means to be able to win election. And so all those things, to me, are just plans by politicians to get into office by all means, not really looking at the will of the people. And when you see that happen, such individual are not really accountable to the people, but to themselves, because they know how they got into office, and whatever they will be doing, they don't care about the feelings of the people, because they are not holding the mandate of the people. They are sitting there by the virtue of their own manipulations.
Well, let's look at the Lagos State example, for instance. It's been stated that because of what has just happened in Lagos State, unless there is arrest and prosecution of the electoral offenders, we're going to see a lot more violence in subsequent elections. Do you agree with this standpoint?
Yes, but you are not going to see that happen in Lagos State. Most especially not when the perpetrators of this same crime are on the side of government. So you wouldn't see that happen.
Now, what do you think this would do to voters' turnout in the next coming elections?
You know, it has been something that has been with us, and we live with it. Nigerian people stomach a whole lot of things that cannot happen in other climes. But here in Nigeria, anybody, provided you have the coverage of government, you can commit any crime and got away with it. And we have not seen our government made a deliberate effort to prosecute those who commit crime. And that is what you are going to see, and that's what we continue to have in Nigeria. For instance, the MC guy in Lagos says should be behind bars by now. There's no reason why he should walk freely on the street, but because he's like on the side of the president-elect, and he's also on the side of the governor of Lagos State. So whatever he does, provided it's to their advantage, it's normal. They see it as being normal. And sometimes I'm very ashamed about our security agencies, that an individual could be more superior or bigger than the institution of government. Our security agencies, without any premonition, without even seeking the permission of anybody, should have take action against such impunity. But in Nigeria, anything goes. So that's what we continue to experience in our country.
All right, let's look at the few positive improvement that INEC featured during the just concluded state election. Now, recall during the presidential elections, INEC agents and officials got to the respective polling unit relatively late, cross boards, but we saw a completely different scenario played out during the governorship elections. INEC officials got to their respective polling unit on time, and in most units, voting actually commenced on time. Your comment for INEC?
Yes, in every event, when you start a process, you may not be able to get it very right at the beginning, but as time goes, you notice where you did not do it right, and you could make some adjustment and improvement. So what we experienced on Saturday was just an improvement based on what INEC observed that were not done right. They tried to bring in those improvements. That's what we experienced. But my point is, I want you to imagine a situation where we went into that election, the first election we had, all round, the presidential election, National Assembly, governorship, and state assembly. I want you to imagine what would have happened. I tell you that the result you would have got in this country would have been different, far, far different from what we got on Saturday.
Okay. Now, you've stated one fact, which has been some of the issues on the contention, and that is why the likes of Peter Obi, the Labour Party presidential candidate, and that of the PDP, Atiku Abubakar, went to court to seek what they say the mandate that was given back to them by Nigerians. And so a lot of litigation is currently ongoing, but we'll leave that for the court to decide whether or not the mandate was given to them. Let's look at another issue. Now, before now, one of the key issues that Nigerians had issues with, which even led to voter apathy, has been the issue of electronic transfer of results from the polling unit. We also saw INEC bringing that into the state election. Now, how do you think this will affect the turnout in the subsequent election if this is further improved on?
Well, it's already a confidence lost, because if you see the enthusiasm that Nigerian people exhibited in the during the first election, everywhere on the road was empty. Nobody was found on the road. Nobody was found in farms. Nobody would go to anywhere because everybody had confidence that their votes will count, and will count on real time, and they had confidence that once they vote, that vote will translate to what they want to see. And that is why you see Nigerian people go through the hardship, the painful hardship that culminated into the election. You could see people sleep hungry, they can't have access to money, they cannot eat, because they felt that something right, their country was being reset on the right path. But having gone through all that, and at the end of the day, it still turned out to be the same thing they thought would have happened without these other policies. So it dampens their morale. That is why in some areas, in some states, you could see low voters turnout. You could see some youth playing football while election was ongoing. That is why a lot of people have lost confidence in INEC in the second election. They felt that there was no point going to vote, that even though they vote, their votes will not mean anything, would not amount to a regime change, it will not amount to the kind of changes they want to see. So that confidence they had in the first election has gone relatively very low. And today, what INEC is doing today is just trying to see how they can rebuild. But I tell you, it will take them another many years to be able to have the kind of confidence that Nigerian people had in the process, in the build-up to the election.
All right, so in this regard, coming from the side of Nigerians, would you join the Nigerians who are calling for the arrest and prosecution of the CBN governor, taking our minds back to the cash redesign policy that, threw Nigeria into the challenges that we saw?
Well, I will want to say that the CBN governor only played the devil's advocate. He wasn't. You don't forget that Nigerian people did not elect the CBN governor. The Nigerian people elected President Muhammadu Buhari, and he holds the mandate of Nigerians, and he should be the one to be most sensitive to the pains and agony of Nigerian people. And so the CBN governor don't take instruction from Nigerian people, but he takes instruction from the president.
But he was given that appointment to serve the Nigerian people.
Yes, even though, but he is answerable to somebody. He is answerable to somebody, and the ball stopped on the president's table. The president cannot claim ignorance of the pains that Nigerians went through. He cannot claim ignorance of the fact that a lot of people died. I had a call the other day, even in the University of DTH Hospital, that the mortuary is filled up. People could not have access to money to buy drugs. People died in the course of treatment because they could not access cash. And in that UTH, it's very difficult if you don't have cash to be able to pay for some medical bills.
Well, it is not limited to UTH. We also had reports across the respective states in Nigeria that medical facilities, practically every agent of government refused to collect transfer or anything outside physical cash. And that significantly led to what we saw. But just before I let you go, let's look at the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, and the failure that has been recorded by INEC and the call from Nigerians for his resignation and prosecution. Are you of the same opinion with Nigerians?
Well, in a sane climate, in a country where integrity is everything, where honesty and transparency is everything, there's no reason why the INEC chairman will still be in office till today. He shouldn't even take a call from Nigerians for him to resign. I remember when the former Minister of Finance in this country was accused of not having exemption, not having served youth service. And without any protest, without any agitation, she voluntarily resigned. And when I dig deep into her background, I discovered that she had most of her training in the US. And so that is where integrity is everything. That is where character is everything. That is where your name, your integrity is your name. Your name is not who your father is or who your mother was, but your integrity, who you are, what you stand for, is the open door for anything you want to do. People want to associate with you because you have integrity. So the INEC chairman should have, first and foremost, the moment he noticed, he saw that he has failed. He has failed Nigerian people in their core responsibility. That was the only thing that brought trust and confidence to the Nigerian people that the result of the election was going to be transmitted electronically on real time. When he noticed that he has failed in that promise, the honorable thing for him to have done would have been to voluntarily resign without any call from any angle for his resignation. So, but in Nigeria, a government official would rather go to court to stop his investigation, to stop his prosecution, to stop anything that would take him away from office. And I wonder if the courts now become a barrier to the people. When people commit crime, instead of facing the crime, instead of defending themselves, they will now run to courts to stop investigation. So that's why you get in Nigeria. But in other climes, there's no way that man would have been in INEC till today.
All right, thank you very much, Joseph, journalist and political affairs analyst, and of course a politician, and that is how far we can go on today's edition of Eye on Issue. We look forward to a time when Nigerian political class, the elite class, and people in position of public service would be so enlightened enough to know that when you fail public trust, you do the honorable thing by resigning and allowing people who are more competent to occupy that position and serve the people. My name is Francis Edet, and it's been a wonderful time being here with you on Eye on Issue. Thank you, Nigeria. Thank you, Africa, for being there. Do have a lovely day. From me to you is bye-bye.